Today we're going to talk about healing, particularly healing from trauma. And when I tell people that I got special training and went into this line of work about trauma, their faces drop and they typically don't want to hear any more about it. But I'm here to tell you that you might find this somewhat interesting and helpful, and you might be surprised how many things can turn into a trauma, and then what you can do to get better and to get some healing from the traumatic things that have happened. What's really interesting to start off is that we have learned in the research that trauma is not something that happens. It's not something that happened to you. It is what our body and mind has come to interpret and take on from these events. So these events can be traumatic. They can cause an extreme amount of distress, and certain events are pretty obvious to cause that. However, the actual trauma is what's left over afterwards, the level of distress and some of the belief systems that we form. So those things are left behind from the traumatic event, and that is what we call the trauma. The most important thing that gets left behind is what we call our worldview. So we know in the trauma research that there are two parts of your worldview that are really important, and one is your belief about yourself as worthwhile and lovable. We want that to stay intact, and sometimes that gets disrupted in the trauma. And the other one is your belief about the world, that the world is safe and that it's a safe thing to be here in this world, and you can kind of count on that. When you have a trauma, usually one or both of those are disrupted. And the work in trauma healing is to help you restore that worldview to a healthier worldview, and also to help you heal even the parts of your body where you have taken on and stored this trauma and you carry it around with you like a heavy backpack. We also know that in the trauma research that a lot of health conditions can come after a trauma, and we don't know exactly how directly it links, but we know that things like arthritis and chronic pain and a variety of other chronic diseases can come after a trauma and can be associated with the trauma. So we know that we do store these things in our bodies and that we can heal them. So here's another piece of it, is that there's two big types of trauma that is important for people to know about. We have big T traumas, and that's the ones that you think about. So that's something like a dramatic car accident where you think you or a loved one could die, or it appears so that someone is going to die, or someone does die in a car accident that you're in with this person. That can cause a big T trauma. And those events are often attributed to the trauma reaction that we have called PTSD. Those are typically related to the threat of real or imagined death of yourself or a loved one. So you have the perception that you're going to die, or that a loved one's going to die, or they actually do die. That will often cause PTSD. Certainly we know people coming back from the military, coming back from war, are going to often have that. Then we also have these small T traumas. And although I agree with this idea of this small T, it doesn't mean that they're small in terms of their impacts. So small T traumas have to do with repeated, really distressing events with loved ones or caregivers or people that you are involved with who are responsible for your safety, especially as a child. So this kind of small T trauma can come from child abuse that's deliberate, from a caregiver or a teacher, for example, or it can come from innocent, unintended neglect of the child's needs. For example, mother being in the hospital for an extended period while the baby is young sometimes can cause this. It could be that the family system gets broken up at an early age, again, unintentional. It could be that one of the parents is in the military and has to leave suddenly, and the child's needs go unmet in certain areas during that time. That can cause one of these small t traumas. It can also just be prolonged relational trauma, meaning that you have a really bad relationship with a primary caregiver and your needs go unmet for a prolonged period. And so this can cause small t traumas, sometimes known as developmental trauma. Again, it's not that those events happen that's the problem. It's how we come to internalize and take on and carry these events. So as sad as that all sounds, here's the good news. We now know that for both big T and small t traumas, healing is possible, and that there are a bunch of newer, more advanced methods for treating trauma. And what does that look like? For example, although internal family systems wasn't originally designed as a trauma treatment, that is now a commonly used trauma treatment and very, very effective. That looks at the different parts of you that have become kind of splintered off and are they're taking on their own personalities and giving you trouble, essentially trying to protect you from further harm, but also protecting you from all the good things. So one of the things that we know in trauma is that it blocks your capacity for a lot of the good things that we want in life, including joy, including love, including adventure and the desire to get out there and do things in the world, courage, confidence. Trauma can block all that. So trauma healing will help you open up your capacity for that. The other types of treatments, neurofeedback has been shown to be really effective, especially for certain kinds of traumas. EMDR is another big trauma treatment you may be familiar with. Lots of good evidence for that. Again, most of this is going to depend on the quality of the person providing the treatment and the type of treatment, not so much just specifically EMDR, but specifically EMDR with a really qualified caregiver who has a lot of experience with trauma. And then there are a lot of these somatic therapies that are really becoming popular for a good reason now, because it looks at your body as a whole and signs from your body about where the trauma is getting trapped. So all of this may sound a little beyond what you've thought of in psychology about what trauma looks like or whether or not you've ever experienced a trauma. As you can imagine, the odds are pretty high that most people have experienced some kind of trauma in their lifetime. And so the good news here is that although it's more common than we think, there's also a lot more treatment and there's a lot more ability to bring about the capacities that got blocked in the trauma. So how do you know if the treatment that you're doing is working? And the biggest thing is it unlocks capacity. So we want to see the person who, before the treatment, had the sense that kind of things are meaningless or they're feeling blocked. They feel like they can't connect. What we found in healing trauma is that you start to be able to connect and that healing comes in connection with others. They say that trauma blocks love and that love heals trauma. So you see that capacity for connection. You also see the capacity to experience the full range of human emotion instead of this sense of feeling numb, shut off, shut down, closed down, dialing down your emotions. You can feel all of them. This does not mean you feel happy all the time, because that's not what emotions do. They come and go, they go up and down, but when you have started to heal, you'll be able to feel more of everything. Some people say, like when you have a child, your highs are higher and your lows are lower. I would say that's the kind of idea here. It opens up your capacity to feel everything. Another capacity that this opens up to is self-trust. You start to believe that you are loved and lovable, that you are worthy. And so then what comes with that is self-trust and the capacity to go after your dreams and to feel that what you're doing here on this earth is worthwhile and meaningful, and that you can make a meaningful contribution. So you start to have a sense of purpose that gets unlocked when you have some healing from this trauma. So this is still intended to be very good news. What we need to know is that trauma is common. That isn't necessarily good news, but we also need to know that trauma healing is also common, and there are a lot of good things on the other side of that. So if you're in a place where you feel like really, really down, and you feel that, yes, a lot of the stuff from the past keeps coming up, that might be a sign that it's time to get some help. And knowing that there is an ability to unblock those capacities that have really gotten trapped as a result of the trauma, and find yourself in a healed place where you can feel alive, excited, feel that your sense of purpose is back online, and that you can do the things that you want to do in your life.